Today, I'm joined by Lauren Hermann, a former medical SLP who has pivoted into an alternative career as a marketer and copywriter for other SLPs. She spends her days working from home or anywhere else in the world, writing for businesses and brands she loves, therapy she advocates for, and people she's honored to elevate. You can find Lauren on Instagram at slp.writer. Lauren, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me here.
I'm so glad we were able to make that work. So, do you feel like there's anything else you want to add, or can we jump into our topics and questions?
We can totally jump right on in. That was perfect.
Awesome. So, give us a brief overview of copywriting and how you got started in this area.
So, copywriting at its most basic definition is truly just the messaging that you see for a business. And that could be messaging anywhere. That could be on websites, sales pages, social medias, even, the fun messaging you see in the back of those like family owned granola bags that tell their story. That's copywriting. So, that is ultimately what that is. And I got started in copywriting I so I always tell people copywriting chose me. I didn't choose copywriting because when I worked as a clinician, I honestly was so obsessed with my career as an SLP in the medical setting. And I was determined to work as a medical SLP until like the day I die, like for as long as I could possibly work as a clinician. But my husband and I moved to a small town in central Pennsylvania, like right before COVID hit. And I was pretty confident at that time that I would just find a job in a hospital like I always did. But because it's such a tiny town, there was one hospital I could apply to, and there were hiring freezes. I couldn't find any work. So I started to build my own private practice. But at that time, Medicare was not yet reimbursing teletherapy for just speech therapists. PTOT, yes, but not speech therapy. And I only saw Medicare patients. So I was limited there. And then eventually I just kind of had a heart to heart with myself one day. And I was just thinking, like, how can I find work where I can combine my passions with something that I'm good at? I knew I was passionate about the field of speech pathology. And I had just published my book, but my speech is fine. I love to write and I, had built up my skills as a writer. So I decided I could try to combine those. And then through a bunch of Google searches and rabbit holes and YouTube videos, I discovered copywriting. And that's kind of when the light bulb went off with if I can't be a clinician, then I might as well market for those who can.
Wow, I love that. What a great story. So, what does the
Yeah.
day in life of a copywriter look like?
Oh man, so much better than my daily life as a medical SLP, actually, because now I get to wake up whenever I want. And I am pretty much an early bird. So let's say I'm going to map out what my day looks like yesterday. So I woke up really early to go to the gym at 7 in the morning to work out with my personal trainer. And then I came back home. I had a latte, I had my breakfast. Then I got back to work. And twice a week, I have team meetings. So I currently have 5 retainer clients. These are businesses that I work with on a month to month basis, and they each have meetings on different days of the week. So, yesterday I had one team meeting with one of them, and then I communicate with them through Slack. And then I just worked on several projects. So, I'm actually going to be as accurate as possible. So, yesterday I worked on a newsletter for one business, a sequence of emails for a webinar for another business, and then social media caption about those webinars for that same business. And that is what I did. When I was done by 4 p.m. yesterday, had my dinner, got to enjoy time with my husband and his parents are here. And then today's just kind of a repeat of whatever the new tasks are for today, the new projects.
That's awesome. So, it's just like very flexible and, you kind of get to choose your schedule.
Yeah. And I will be honest here. So some days the workload might be really low, or maybe I front loaded my work early in the week so that, towards the end of the week I don't have much to do at all. Maybe I just work 1 hour or 2 hours. But then there'll be other weeks where I am just flooded with work and it can get overwhelming. And so I don't want to put out this message or this idea that every single day in the life as a copywriter is just so easy breezy beautiful
Yeah.
copywriting girl, that it's going to ebb and flow. And some days, yes, I've wanted to burn down my business. I've wanted to just give it all up because it has been so overwhelming sometimes. But then there are other days where I'm like, wow, like I kind of stress myself out thinking like, isn't there more I need to do? Am I truly done for the day? And I can go to the beach or something, which is really nice to have. So it's a balance between workloads.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's definitely something that I experience. And when you're in it and overwhelmed, you're like, do I really want to do this? This is a lot harder than I signed up for, but it definitely has its ebbs and flows for sure.
Yeah, and the flexibility too. I mean, the fact, working from home, I mean, one of my favorite parts about it is the fact that I don't have to ask for anybody's approval for time off, and I don't have to feel guilty. So, if I had like patients on my caseload, and then I'd feel guilty if I took a week off and it like disrupted their therapy schedule or something else happens, I can, if I wanted to go to New York City for a week, I could bring my work with me. I don't have to pause work, or I can just restructure my schedule. It won't stop me from traveling. And that is something that I love the most about this alternative career as an SLP.
Yeah. So, how did you get clients to start? And did you do it like part time? You said that you kind of were forced into this because of COVID, right? So, how did you get clients and grow your business?
Yeah. So, okay, when I was totally out of a job, out of work during COVID, around that time, that is when the Medical SLP Collective was hiring for, it was called the content director position. And that wasn't a copywriter position, but it was a position where I basically had to find SLPs who'd be interested in contributing to a webinar or to resources. And I wound up writing the weekly newsletters to the members of the Medical SLP Collective. That right there was copywriting. I just didn't know at the time that that's what it was called. And so that was kind of my first experience. Once I discovered what copywriting was and I started taking some courses, I branched out and I actually started a profile on Upwork.com, which is a freelancing website. And you can look to see what jobs are available. A lot of businesses will post a gig or something, and then you can send a pitch. So the very first one that I sent a pitch to, it wasn't at all related to healthcare. It was for a road trip travel magazine. And the editor was looking for a story about anywhere in Idaho. They just wanted to feature like a cool town in Idaho that not many people know about. And the summer before COVID, my husband rode his bicycle across the US. I had the car. And so I would drive ahead of him and find a campsite or whatever. And he got lost. He took a wrong turn in Idaho. And so, I thought he was dead. I was freaking out. I'm trying to figure out where in the world I can find him. We wound up reuniting like on this back road. I basically broke down into tears. And so we altered our routes to spend the night in this like tiny town in Idaho. And that's the story I wrote about for this magazine. So I pitched that story. The editor loved it. I wrote the story, did some revisions, and then when it published in the magazine, I got the free copy of the magazine with my story in it in a paycheck for $250. And so that was my first like actual paid specific that was content writing for magazine. And then I just pitched other businesses through Upwork. And something that I love to tell people, this was wild to me. One woman who had an app in the healthcare space, and it would require a lot of trauma informed language for anyone who was writing for this particular app. She wound up just offering me a job. I didn't know it existed at all. I just woke up one morning and I had a job offer in my inbox waiting for me. And so I messaged her asking her if she meant to do that or if she wanted to, interview me. And she told me, I saw on your bio, on your profile, that you have a background in healthcare. And for this project, I need somebody who has that experience and understands trauma informed language and gets that empathy side. She's like, in my experience, people who don't have a background in healthcare lack with that, or they struggle with that. So she's like, I trust you based on just your profile alone. And so I worked with her, and I think at that time I charged maybe $30 an hour because that was my first hourly copywriting gig ever. And then I built my way up from there. So I got off of Upwork. I made a big announcement on Facebook that now I'm a copywriter, and I set up my LLC, and anybody who knows a healthcare business looking for copywriters to reach out to me. And I had two SLP business owners send me a DM after I announced that on Facebook, seeing if I would want to write for them. And one of them wound up being one of my first retainer clients, and we worked together for 2 years. So that was, from there. And then basically it was word of mouth and then just building up my Instagram, and it just kind of kept growing from there.
That's awesome. So what type of SLP business owners do you find that you work with? Is it like a private practice owner? Do they own like a software program?
So I have worked with multiple private practice owners. Usually that is for their websites. I will either they don't have a website or I will totally revamp the language on their website and help them kind of give it a facelift. And then I also write for a lot of SLP business owners that are in the continuing education space. So it might just be a bunch of webinars or podcasts, other continuing education programs, and then other just online business owners where maybe they're launching a new program or something. So I'm helping them to write all of the emails involved in launching this program. And those are pretty much, oh, and medical device too. I do write for one medical device company in the SLP world as well. And so that's a lot of fun. And that involves more, technical knowledge. Like I have taken the training to use and become certified in this device. And you just have to be aware of like the FDA rules and regulations of marketing for medical devices. So you do have to be aware of that legal side of it as well. What can you say and what can you not say? Same goes for private practice as well.
Wow, that's really cool. So, what are some transferable skills that SLPs have to become copywriters?
So this is what was so eye-opening to me coming as a clinician because as SLPs, we're essentially marketing our skills every day. So we, at least for me, when I would approach a patient's room and I would introduce myself, so many times I would get that same response we all hear, speech therapy, but my speech is fine. I don't need you. So they automatically think I'm in the wrong room. So now I
Yeah.
have to educate. And so what I learned as a clinician is that we also have to work with it's called the 5 stages of customer awareness. We have to work with that as clinicians as well. So in that instance where I walk into a patient's room, they have no clue who I am or what I do. They're in the unaware phase and I have to make them problem and solution aware by introducing, you're correct, your speech is great, but the reason why I'm here is because of your swallowing and I can offer this potential solution with my, assessment and treatments, and then essentially just get them on board with working with me once they are more aware of the problems and solutions that I have to offer as an SLP. Not only that, so that's in copywriting, I have to do that. I have to know how to write to specific audiences. The way I write for social media for my clients, you're casting a wider net. You're going to have more people that have no idea who you are or that a problem even exists that you're out there to solve. So you educate and nurture and then you get more specific with emails, websites, etc. So that's one parallel. That's a transferable skill is we're doing that almost daily as clinicians. Another thing is our entire process as a clinician, when you get a new case, you can't just dive right in and say, all right, we're going to start treating you today. I'm a speech therapist. I know how to do this. Let's go. You have to do your chart review. You have to look at past medical history. And as a copywriter, I call it past marketing history. So I'm doing my quote unquote chart review. I'm looking at past marketing history. I'm seeing what exists already. Where are the problems that the business owner might be aware of and is complaining about and wants quote unquote copywriting therapy for or a solution for. And then once I do my chart review or my online review, and then I come up with a plan of care, like you would as an SLP. For me as a copywriter, I call it the plan of copy. So what messages am I going to write? Where are these messages going to be seen? And what are the goals of those messages? And just like with speech therapy, when you have your plan of care, you move forward with that therapy plan if the patient or client is on board with it. So same thing with copywriting, you have to have that communication and really make them aware of what your plan is and why. Then we move forward with that plan of copy. And it's a lot of testing and retesting. So just like in therapy, you're going to provide the therapy, you're going to reassess, and you're going to see were improvements made or did things actually get worse or are there no improvements? And then maybe do a new plan of care and make tweaks here and there and then try to find something that works. That's exactly what you do with copywriting too. There's a lot of data collecting and assessing and reassessing with how effective your marketing and your writing is until finally you can help your client meet their goal. In copywriting, just like you would as a speech therapist, you're helping your patient or client meet their goals as well. So there's so many parallels that we already do as clinicians, but obviously we're not thinking about it from a marketing perspective. But ultimately, as clinicians, you are identifying problems, coming up with solutions, and you have to get your patients or clients on board with it. It's the exact same thing with a copywriting career. Really, the only difference is just the way you deliver your practice. So instead of obviously therapy and doing dysphagia therapy, it's all through my writing and my communication skills on a Google Doc that will eventually wind up on a sales page or something. So knowing that language as well is pretty important. As a therapist, you have to speak the language of your patient, right? You're not going to go in using all this medical jargon with them. You have to speak their language. That is identical to copywriting. You have to speak the language of your audience. And I love how conversational it is. So, I mean, I could just go on and on about the parallels, but those are pretty much like the core parallels between being a clinician and being a copywriter.
Oh, I love that. Those are great parallels. Thank you for sharing that. So, what do you like more and what do you like less about being a copywriter compared to being a medical SLP?
Man, so okay, we'll start with what I like more about being a copywriter. And I had already mentioned this earlier that I love that I can work anywhere in the world that has internet and no one can tell me no. No one can deny that. And the reason why I feel so strongly about that as well is because in my clinical fellowship year, I had this awesome opportunity to go to Iceland with a good friend of mine from high school. It was going to be a week-long trip, and I asked my rehab director, for time off, and she said, "Well, it looks like you have this one patient, her Medicare minutes are due on the week you're supposed to be gone. So you need to find someone to cover her because she has to meet her minutes so that we can get paid by Medicare." I was the only SLP at that facility, and PT and OT was not seeing her. So I had to find another SLP who did not work in my building, but they worked for the same company. And so I was putting out Facebook posts. I was reaching out to my network of SLPs all over the state of Virginia, trying to see if anybody would be willing to travel. And I would pay them for their travel to cover just one 30-minute therapy session. And no one could do it. No one was able to, or no one wanted to. I wasn't sure. So because I could not find anyone to cover this one 30-minute session, I lost an entire week opportunity in Iceland with my good friend from high school. And I wasn't going to go anyway and abandon my patient because had I not seen her, she would have dropped from my case. And there was just, obviously I was not going to do that. So that was really hard. So anyway, that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about what I love more about being a copywriter is I can now, if I wanted to work in Iceland, I can and enjoy Iceland while I'm at it. Another thing that I enjoy more about copywriting, it's it's the fact that I can build out my own schedule. So I can, if I'm really like sleep deprived and I just want to sleep in one day and start at 10, I can. As long as I have no meetings before 10. So I can work around that. I can go to the gym when I want. There's just so much more flexibility and I get to be at home too. And my husband works from home as well. So we'll have our lunch breaks together, we'll go on walks together, and that's really nice. Things that I like more about being a speech therapist when I was a medical speech pathologist, right, I loved my patients so much. I mean, I would actually be so excited to go to work. And I feel like that's not the most common story you hear. Granted, I did not work during COVID, and I know there's just a whole new level of burnouts that I dodged because of that. But I really, really, really just, I would light up whenever I would get to see my patients. And I do miss the work environment with my colleagues. I always looked forward to seeing my nurse friends, my RD friends, OT, PT, the residents. I just loved it. It was just such a fun community to go to in the hospital every day. And there is something to be said about truly separating your work life from your home life. Now it's also blended. So, when I left the hospital, I clocked out and I was done for the day. That was it. No one could get me to do anything else. The whole evening was free. But now, as a business owner and a copywriter, I'm not the greatest with the boundaries. So there's no clock in, clock out for me. And if a client messages me at like 7 or 8 p.m., even if they don't intend for me to read it, my brain just wants me to. And so I can't help it. And I need to work on that. But I might work a little later than I want to simply because I have access to it. And so I don't like that. I wish that I still had that kind of like that physical barrier of work versus home. So those are the main differences of what I like more as a copywriter versus what I enjoyed more as an SLP working in a hospital.
Yeah. No, there's always pros and cons to everything, right? So thank you for being honest and sharing both sides. And I think people just really have to decide what's important to them. I go through the same considerations, working for somebody and now owning my own businesses and then just thinking about like my family schedule and sometimes like we were talking about before the business gets so overwhelming or we have a Saturday event or something and I'm like, man, should I just be more simple while my daughter is young? Should I just work in a school, have time off while she's off, be done at like 3:30? So there's no like right or wrong answer. I think that I'm ultimately doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But when you're in the thick of it, it really makes you question yourself. So I just wanted to let everybody know that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And like nothing's going to be perfect. Like you really just have to consider what's important to you in your stage of life and then what you want long term. Like every time I think about going and getting a regular job, I'm like, but I probably won't wanna be there in 5 years. So then what's the point, right? Why don't I just get into the thick of the business now? And so hopefully in 5, 10 years, it'll have accumulated or, be able to sustain more on its own, or I can hire more people to help run it, and then it'll all be worth it.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes I do find myself kind of daydreaming, like, yeah, just like you were saying, like, I don't know, maybe we should go back, the clinical work because of what I missed. But I mean, again, like you said, the grass isn't always greener. I'm sure I would get maybe bored at a certain facility, or I get really frustrated with the limitations, like not being able to take time off to travel whenever I want to, stuff like that. And yeah, just like you said, kind of just willing yourself just to, when the times get tough, just kind of taking it one day at a time and knowing that you have kind of this bigger goal that you can meet. Whereas, at least for me, when I worked full time, you kind of hit a ceiling of how far you can go. And so it's like, okay, maybe I've reached the top of the clinical ladder. Now what? And then that's, with business, you can just keep going if you wanted to, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, it's such good points. It really is. It's like so hard at some points, but there is no ceiling and there is a lot more flexibility. I know I was saying to my husband, I'm like, we're gone 7 times this year. I could take off one time when I worked for somebody else.
Yeah.
Like it's not possible. So
Yeah.
that is a huge, huge perk for sure.
Yeah. And then even like sick days, I feel like, that's the other thing.
Felt so bad
when
about
I
taking a sick day, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you feel so bad. And when I worked in the skilled nursing facility, I remember I developed a fever on the, like while I was working. I could feel the chills. A nurse took my temperature and it was already like 101. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to go. But my rehab director tried to push me to just see again another patient where her Medicare minutes were up. And thankfully, I had a physical therapist colleague who she stood up for me and she was like, absolutely not. Like, she is actively ill. We cannot have her spreading disease to our elderly
Yeah.
population. That is, you know what I mean? Like, there were so many ethical dilemmas
Yeah.
like in that particular setting that I just don't have to worry about as a copywriter. So it's, yeah, you have your pros and cons in both. There are things I miss and then definitely things I do not miss.
The ethical dilemma is the biggest when you really think
Yes.
about it. Because when someone's integrity is being challenged, you just don't feel good about what you're doing. It like defeats the purpose. So you could have all of the perks in the world, but if what you're doing doesn't feel ethically right and you don't have a lot of control over it, it's like a rock in a hard place.
Yeah. And you feel stuck too. A lot of times, you might have this job where you are in these ethical dilemmas, but maybe there aren't many jobs available. And so you feel like you're trapped at that point, especially if you're not, financially well off enough to just take off for a certain amount of time to try to find another job. But then like on the copywriting side, at least for me, like I get to choose, who my clients are depending on my schedule and how booked out I am. And what I love is that when I develop these relationships with clients and help them market their business, in my experience, every time my clients have been so open to feedback and suggestions, they might be coming from like an old school marketing background, and I'm coming in with these kind of more, I don't know if it's ethical, but like transparent perspectives, and like, oh my gosh, like that's such a great point. Yes, let's do that, and just so much more open dialogue versus, especially when I was a CF, I feel like I just couldn't make suggestions. You just feel like you're not allowed to, and you're pressured by other people, and it's just such a different world.
Yeah. Yep. You're totally right. So, how can SLPs get involved with the copy clinicians if they're interested, and where can everybody find and connect with you?
So I'm on Instagram. As you had said in your introduction, slp.writer is my Instagram handle. And if you go to the link in my bio, you'll see several links. One is where you can join my email list. And so you'll get some emails sent out by me where I describe some, fun facts about copywriting, what copywriting is, and maybe even the wait list for the course that I've built out, which is the Clinician to Copywriter Accelerator. So I've just started my second cohort this week. And it's basically just an introductory level 8-week program to walk clinicians through the foundational concepts of copywriting. And you get to actually practice your copywriting skills with an actual private practice business. So they get to volunteer their business and you get to write social media captions, a blog, a website for that private practice owner and add that to your portfolio. So it's a really fun program. So that is an option for you if you're interested in becoming a copywriter on the side or full time. And all of that's going to be through my Instagram account.
That's awesome. Amazing, Lauren. Thank you so much. This has been really, I think, eye opening for a lot of people who maybe are feeling stuck. And I'm sure you'll hear from some of the listeners. So I really appreciate it. And I look forward to collaborating in the future.
Yes, thank you so much, Benita. This is so much fun.